Good morning everybody, welcome to Ash Davies on Cars, and welcome to what I think could be quite an interesting day, because we're on our way now to see the very first and indeed the only Aston Martin DBX in the country and have a very close look at it. And what better way to go and look at the new Aston Martin DBX than in my own older Aston Martin Virage. Partly because it's the only car I have, but also because I think this serves as a very good reference point for what we're going to go and look at today. Because I, like a lot of people, am not a big fan of this trend towards big luxury, overpriced SUVs. Cars like the Bentley Bentayga and the Lamborghini Urus, I think are just big, overpriced Audis with a lot of badge. So today, part of what I want to understand is not just if the Aston Martin DBX is a very good SUV, I'm sure it's very capable and competent, but I want to know, is it a real Aston Martin? Is it a car that is luxurious and opulent? Is it bespoke and beautiful but still brutal in its sophistication? Is it an SUV, or is it a car that's worthy of the badge? We're here now with a row of DBSs on the outside. Wow, it's not a bad place to drive into. It's an expensive looking car park. Have a look at this. So we've had some time now to go through the car in depth, and the first impressions of the Aston Martin DBX are that this is incredibly bespoke. Whereas cars like the Lamborghini Urus and the Bentley Bentayga all follow the same form because they're based on the same Audi platform, the DBX is the first car in this market which doesn't have to conform to its peers. Its all aluminium unibody structure, the Daimler drivetrain, is something that we haven't seen before in an SUV. And it shows because this is very unique. You can tell in its silhouette. Come and take a closer look. First little things which hark back to Aston's history. Of course, you've got the typical Aston grille, but you've also got these fog lights at the side which look a little more like the fog lights you had on the early Vanquish or even on the early DB7 Vantage, the big rounded fog lights at the side of the grille. And the side profile here of the bonnet, the way the bonnet shape wraps over the wheel arches in a very DB11 format, is something again that you don't normally see on a car like the Audi, because it doesn't have to follow the same space frame and platform. Every body panel on this car, once you dive into it, is a little bit special and a little bit unique, even ones like the door. Typically on a Range Rover or an Audi, you have a door line which floats along the bottom, which means that as you step into the car, you can rub your foot over the elements of all the off-roading that you're not doing. But in the DBX, you'll see that the body panel itself wraps all the way over the underside of the car. So when you open the door, none of this is exposed to the outside world. We'll jump into the car now. You can jump in that side. Inside the car is very familiar to, I'd say, a big DB11. It doesn't feel like the interior in the cabin that you typically see within a big SUV. It more feels like the cabin of a GT car that just happens to be on stilts. This is very familiar, the Daimler controls, quite a big widescreen there. I do miss the start-stop button where you get to put the key into the ignition. I don't really have too many comments about the ergonomics because it's very familiar. If you told me that I was in a DB11, I'd probably believe you. Let's jump into the back now and see what the rear legroom is like. And already, my goodness, for a car that on the exterior feels almost shrink-wrapped, on the inside it feels enormous. My driving position there is exactly as I would have it, but I've still got all of the legroom in the world here, and even little Aston Martin headrests to get myself comfortable. I could very much see myself going on a long journey in this car, and it's also one of the only Astons I've ever sat in which has genuine legroom. A couple of specs while we're here: the car does have a 4-litre twin turbocharged V8 engine, the same drivetrain that's used in the Vantage and cars like the AMG GT. It has over 500 horsepower and it has a top speed in excess of 290 kilometers an hour. That's absurd for a car of this size and weight, but again, it shows that the car is edging towards more sporting credibility than SUV territory. Boot space and the rear of the car. In pictures, the V8 Vantage style ducktail spoiler looks a little bit odd, but it does suit the contours of the car. I feel like the tail might age a little bit. It doesn't seem quite as elegant and as simple as, say, the rear of a DBS, so I'd kind of expect that to change over time. The badge is also enormous. Just get a look at how big that Aston Martin badge is and tell me what jeweler in the world has that much metal available. Opening up the boot, of course, all hydraulic and electric. The floor of the boot space here is quite high and elevated. You can adjust the ride height at the front and rear of the car. The space itself can fit 4 golf clubs, or maybe bags of golf clubs, that is. I can't take my eyes off the quality of the carbon fiber around the rear diffuser and around the exhaust. The back feels a little like someone's taken a V8 Vantage, put it in Photoshop, and then stretched it vertically. Even the little hexagonal holes around the rear exhaust are incredibly Vantage. There's no hidden floor. You can't get into that little space at all to reveal a secondary cubby hole, but the rear seats as well, you can fold down with buttons. All quite easy and straightforward. I reckon you could fit 12 golden retrievers in there. So the Aston Martin DBX is really a wonderfully detailed, beautiful car. For an SUV, the level of quality, the fit, the finish, and the feel and shape of the car is unlike anything that I've really seen before in a car of its size and class. In a way, it doesn't matter what I think of the SUV market in general. I can share that the DBX feels like an Aston Martin, like a GT car that's put on stilts. The general manager of Aston Martin before had shared a couple of interesting details. They've blown through their order books for this car. It's even sold out in the Australian market for the next 12 months. They're trying to get more cars in. Of all of their customers who own an Aston Martin, more than 70% of their customer base has an SUV in the garage. And more than 60% of the people who are buying this car are new to the Aston Martin brand. So I think they're onto a winner. I think this is one of the most remarkable SUVs in the market, and it doesn't feel like an SUV. This feels like a big Aston Martin. Though quite what it drives like on the road, we don't know yet. That, I'm hoping, can be arranged for another day.